In our headlines on this Thursday, November 27th, here in South Korea. A major milestone is marked in South Korea's space ambitions as its homegrown Nuri rocket soars into space for a fourth successful mission today, placing a total of 13 satellites into orbit. Meanwhile, the Bank of Korea is maintaining its interest rate at 2.5% for the fourth policy session in a row amid concerns over currency volatility and financial stability. And in northern Hong Kong, a fatal fire races through several high-rise residential towers starting Wednesday afternoon, killing dozens of people and leaving hundreds unaccounted for.
5, 4, 3, 2, 엔진 점화.
We start with some exciting news here on the local front as South Korea marks yet another milestone in its space mission as its homegrown Nuri space rocket successfully soars into space in the wee hours of this Thursday for a fourth flight and places 13 satellites into orbit. Our correspondent Park Gonu has the highlights.
3, 2, 1. Off Korea's homegrown Nuri rocket goes, soaring into space for its fourth mission, lifting off from Gyeonggung County in Jeollanam province in the country's southwest at 1:13 a.m. on Thursday. This liftoff came 18 minutes later than scheduled, after an abnormal signal was detected in the umbilical retraction pressure sensor. But despite concerns over the delay, Nuri thundered into the sky with confidence, as if proving itself once again. The mission's success was confirmed about 90 minutes later as the main satellite among the 13 satellites on board reached an orbit of 601.3 kilometers, well within the 600-kilometer target in the 6% error range.
Following the successful third launch, the fourth mission has further strengthened Nuri's reliability and reaffirmed Korea's autonomous space development capabilities. Nuri will conduct 2 additional flights through 2027 to enhance its technical stability and performance.
He added that Korea will also push forward with the next-generation launch vehicle, building on the technology and experience gained from the Nuri program. And beyond its success, this fourth launch drew special attention as it was the first time Nuri ever flew at night. As this marks the first nighttime launch among all previous Nuri rocket projects, today's mission has even greater significance, providing ideal conditions for the main satellite to observe auroras. Launching at night was intentional, as nighttime conditions helped the main satellite enter the perfect orbit for aurora observation. The mission also saw more satellites than ever before, 13 in total, up from the 7 carried in the previous launch 2.5 years ago. Adding to the milestone, this fourth vehicle was manufactured entirely by the private company Hana Aerospace, marking a major step in Korea's shift toward a private sector-driven launch system and a deeper transfer of space technology. With today's achievement, excitement is already building for the next 2 Nuri missions in the coming years, in 2026 and 2027. Park Gonu, Arirang News, Kohung.
President Lee Jae-myung has urged his aides to promptly draw up a comprehensive plan to turn the diplomatic pledges from his latest overseas trip into tangible courses of action. During a weekly meeting earlier on this Thursday, he also pointed out that leaders in the UAE, Egypt, South Africa and Turkey voiced much interest in bolstering defense partnership with South Korea. That being said, he further vowed to boost global cooperation in high-tech industries and culture. The Bank of Korea is maintaining its benchmark interest rate at 2.5% for the fourth policy session in a row amid concerns over currency volatility and financial stability. Our correspondent Moon Ji-young reports.
The Bank of Korea has once again held its key interest rate at 2.5%, continuing with its easing cycle pause for a fourth straight meeting amid rising concerns over currency volatility and financial stability risks. This decision follows the final Monetary Policy Committee meeting of the year on Thursday.
Although inflation has inched higher and uncertainty over the growth outlook persists, consumption and exports continue to improve, and financial stability risks remain. Given these conditions, we judge that maintaining the current policy rate while closely assessing domestic and external developments is appropriate.
The move comes as the Korean won has slipped into the upper 1,400 won range against the dollar, a 7-month low. Officials say a rate cut could add pressure to the currency amid uncertainty about U.S. monetary policy and strong dollar demand from overseas investment. Household debt and house prices, especially in the Seoul metropolitan area, also remain key concerns. On the same day, the central bank also released its updated economic outlook. It now expects the economy to grow 1% this year and 1.8% next year, slightly higher than its August forecast.
We expect exports and facilitated investment to grow more than initially forecast, largely due to the conclusion of the Korea-U.S. trade negotiations and a strong global semiconductor market. On the consumption side as well, expansionary fiscal policy and improving economic sentiment are expected to accelerate the pace of recovery.
Even so, the bank cautions that uncertainty remains, particularly regarding the global trade environment and the speed of the semiconductor recovery. Inflation is now projected at 2.1% for both this year and next year, reflecting the weaker won and a modest pickup in domestic demand. The bank expects inflation to stay above its 2% target for now, with the outlook hinging largely on exchange rate movements and global energy prices. The Korea-U.S. key rate gap currently stands at 1.5%. With the U.S. Federal Reserve meeting next month, markets are watching closely for any shift in U.S. rate policy. The Bank of Korea is maintaining a cautious stance, and while rate cuts remain on the table, any further move will depend on growth, inflation, and financial stability in the coming months. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, South Korea's largest search engine and the operator of the country's biggest crypto exchange intend to invest almost $7 billion over the next 5 years to build a financial infrastructure based on AI and blockchain. Our Ian Jin explains.
Naver, the operator of South Korea's largest internet portal, its fintech subsidiary Naver Financial, which handles the country's largest annual payment volume of over 30 trillion won, and Dunamu, the operator of the country's biggest crypto exchange Upbit, held a joint press conference Thursday morning and said they will invest 10 trillion Korean won, or nearly $7 billion over the next 5 years, as they seek to better respond to rapidly changing global tech trends. This announcement follows each of the three companies holding board meetings on Wednesday to approve the merger that would incorporate Dunamu into the Naver Group through a comprehensive stock swap, and said they will consolidate each company's capabilities to pursue global expansion. The three companies said they plan to work together on designing a next-generation financial infrastructure that combines AI and blockchain technology, intending to establish a new platform that extends beyond payments that can cover the broader financial sector and even everyday lifestyle services. When the merger of the three companies is completed, the deal will create a mega fintech company with a combined value of 20 trillion won. The merger would extend Naver's influence from search, content, e-commerce, and fintech into the cryptocurrency sector. Ian-jin, Arirang News.
A decades-long principle separating banks and big businesses is under fierce debate here in South Korea as the country hopes to see an astronomical expansion in the size of investments into artificial intelligence. Our Kim Do-yeon covers the points of contention.
The separation of banks and commerce is nearly a century-old worldwide law effective for 43 years in South Korea. The rule is simple. Industrial companies cannot own banks. It was established to prevent powerful conglomerates from treating financial affiliates as private ATMs, stopping them from risking depositors' money for reckless expansion. But the sheer cost of the AI and semiconductor war is forcing a rethink. The debate reignited last month after President Lee Jae-myung met with OpenAI CEO Sam Altman alongside the leaders of Samsung Electronics and SK Group. Following the meeting, President Lee hinted at deregulation, suggesting that without massive capital injections, the nation's strategic industries could fall behind. However, the opposition is fierce and organized. Civic groups, including the Citizens Coalition for Economic Justice and Economic Reform Solidarity, argue that loosening these rules is a dangerous regression. They warn that deregulation could destabilize the financial system and deepen the concentration of economic power. Specifically, critics point out that this looks like a tailored favor for the SK Group. Unlike other conglomerates, SK faces unique investment limitations under its current holding company structure. Opponents argue that altering a fundamental economic law to solve the liquidity issues of a single conglomerate constitutes unfair bias. Government regulators are also pumping the brakes. Fair Trade Commission Chair Ju Byung-gi cautioned against shaking the backbone of the economic system. But the industry argues that government funds alone are a drop in the bucket. Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry Chairman and SK Group Chair Choi Tae-won says the current system cannot handle the costs of the future and that he wasn't trying to repeal banking and commerce laws. He emphasized the funds needed. A single gigawatt scale data center costs 70 trillion won to build. Meanwhile, the US and China are planning hundreds of them.
Our message is being distorted, as if we are just complaining about a lack of funds or demanding that the separation of banking and commerce be scrapped. That is not our intention. We are simply asking for a new system capable of handling this scale of investment.
The ruling Democratic Party has proposed a compromise allowing holding companies to establish special purpose vehicles for strategic investments. Policymakers now face a critical test: how to fuel the engines of AI growth without dismantling the financial safety rails that have protected the economy for decades. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
A plenary session began at the National Assembly this afternoon to address a number of bills, including a high-profile motion for the arrest of the former floor leader of the main opposition party. For the latest there, we connect now to our political correspondent Moon Hae-ryun. Hae-ryun, welcome. Let's start with the motion against Chu Kyung-ho. What can you tell us?
Good afternoon, Sunny. A vote on the motion to arrest former floor leader Chu Kyung-ho of the People Power Party took place during the plenary session today, which began at 2 p.m. The vote on the motion, conducted by anonymous secret ballot, passed with 172 votes in favor, 4 against, 2 abstentions, and 2 invalid ballots out of 180 lawmakers present. Chu is accused of interfering with the National Assembly's vote to lift last year's December 3rd martial law declaration. Under the Constitution, sitting lawmakers are protected from arrest or detention during a session unless the Assembly gives consent. When prosecutors request an arrest warrant for a sitting member during a session, a motion to arrest is submitted to the Assembly. For the motion to pass, a majority of all lawmakers must be present, and a majority of those present must vote in favor. Since the ruling Democratic Party supported the motion and holds the majority of seats, this outcome was widely expected. With the motion approved, Chu will undergo a hearing at the court where he will face a pre-arrest interrogation to determine whether a detention warrant will be issued, a session expected to be scheduled for early next month.
Right, I see. Before you head off, Hae-ryun, could you tell us a bit about the other bills on the agenda at this plenary session?
So, other than the motion to arrest Chu, 7 public welfare bills were also on the agenda. This includes the likes of what's been dubbed the K-Steel Act, as it includes establishing a presidential committee on bolstering South Korea's competitiveness in the steel industry and providing subsidies, loans and tax benefits for green steel technology development and investment. Originally, the DP had pushed to pass around 90 such bills, but a compromise to take up the remaining bills alongside the national budget on December 2nd was reached with the PPP this afternoon. National Assembly Speaker Won Jik urged both parties to prioritize people's livelihoods over political disputes as the deadline approaches to process next year's budget bill.
Instead of sparring, I ask both parties to do their best until the end to secure every possible budget for the people.
And this comes amid high tensions between the two parties over a push for a parliamentary investigation into a real estate scandal in Seongnam's Daejangdong district during President Lee Jae-myung's tenure as mayor. And that's all I have for now, so back to you, Sunny.
All right, Arirang, thank you for the latest at the National Assembly. Moving on then, South Korea's Coup and Cheonghae units will remain committed to their overseas missions for another year. This extension of deployment until the end of 2026 follows related approval by the National Assembly Defense Committee on this Thursday. The Coup unit was dispatched to the United Arab Emirates in 2011 to strengthen cooperation between the two countries. The Cheonghae unit was dispatched to the Gulf of Aden in 2009 under a UN Security Council resolution and has been extended to ensure safety along major maritime routes and to expand defense cooperation with partners like the European Union. In other news, a ferocious fire engulfed a compound of high-rise residential towers in northern Hong Kong, killing dozens of people and leaving hundreds missing. Our Park Jun-han has more.
At least 55 people have died and hundreds are still missing after a major fire tore through several high-rise residential buildings in Hong Kong's northern Tai Po neighborhood. Authorities expect that the death toll may rise as many people who were recovered are severely injured, as well as those still missing. The fire broke out on Wednesday at the Wong Puk Court housing complex, a cluster of 8 blocks with almost 2,000 apartments, which are home to more than 4,600 residents, nearly 40% of them elderly. Hundreds of residents had to be evacuated after the fire spread across 7 of the 8 towers. While the direct cause of the fire is unknown, investigators claim that certain materials on the building's exterior walls did not meet fire resistance criteria. In what appears to be the city's deadliest fire since World War II, the authorities said they will make every effort to halt the blaze.
I take this incident with the utmost seriousness. I have instructed all government departments and units to make every effort on multiple fronts. Our top priority is to extinguish the fire and rescue the trapped residents.
As the search for missing persons in the ongoing fire continues, Chinese leader Xi Jinping expressed his condolences and has allocated 2 million yuan, or around 410 million Korean won, to Red Cross emergency aid. The U.S. Consulate General in Hong Kong and Macau and the British Foreign Secretary offered their condolences on social media to those affected by the deadly fire. As the fire spread in what the authorities described as an unusual manner, a criminal investigation was launched, and 3 men from the building's construction company were arrested on suspicion of manslaughter. They include 2 directors and a consultant accused of gross negligence. While rescue efforts are still ongoing, evacuated survivors are painfully awaiting the fate of their missing loved ones. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, authorities there say a targeted shooting has critically hurt 2 members of the U.S. National Guard who were on patrol. Our Lee Sing-jae reports.
Authorities in the U.S. say a suspect is in custody after 2 members of the National Guard were shot on Wednesday in a busy area of downtown Washington, D.C., not far from the White House. The incident prompted an immediate lockdown of the building, although President Donald Trump was in Florida at the time. The shooting unfolded during the late afternoon when foot traffic and government activity in the area were still heavy. An officer from the D.C. Metropolitan Police said a back and forth had occurred after the suspect turned a corner and opened fire at the National Guard members. FBI Director Kash Patel said both guardsmen are in a critical condition. The motive behind the attack also remains unknown, and investigators are now reviewing surveillance footage and interviewing witnesses who were in the area at the time. The suspect was taken into custody after he was shot and subdued by other guard members nearby.
On a somber note, we had, and some of you may have seen this on your phones or on social media, but apparently there was a shooting outside the White House just a couple of hours ago. And we're still learning everything. We still don't know the motive. There's a lot that we haven't yet figured out. But
Speaking to troops in Kentucky on Wednesday, Vice President J.D. Vance called on anyone who's a person of faith to say a prayer for the two National Guardsmen. Tourists close to the crime scene were also caught up in the incident as shots were fired in an area that's heavily secured.
I was walking around and I was trying to get to the White House, and I see all the guns drawn, and I see all the weapons, and I see all the Secret Service out, and I was like, okay, something happened. So what happened?
Authorities say the area around the White House has returned to normal operations, but the investigation is expected to remain active for some time. Federal and local agencies are coordinating to determine whether the shooter acted alone, what led to the encounter, and whether the victims were targeted specifically or were caught in a broader confrontation. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. In West Africa, officers from Guinea-Bissau's military declared they had seized power after gunfire erupted on Wednesday near the presidential palace in the capital ahead of the announcement of presidential election results. Government sources told the BBC that President Umaro Sissoco Embalo was detained, along with his election challenger Fernando Diaz, former Prime Minister Domingos Pereira, and Interior Minister Boche Kande. Officers appeared on state television announcing that they had suspended the electoral process, closed the country's borders, and imposed a nighttime curfew. They said they acted to prevent what they called an attempt by unnamed politicians, backed by a well-known drug baron, to destabilize the country. The generals leading the takeover also detained the chief of the army and his deputy. Guinea-Bissau has experienced multiple coups or attempts over the past 5 decades. In Thailand, authorities declared the southern province of Songkhla a disaster zone after days of torrential rain left at least 33 people dead and thousands stranded. Officials said flooding has hit 9 southern provinces, affecting more than 2 million people and forcing 13,000 into shelters on Wednesday. The city of Hat Yai has been one of the worst hit, with floodwaters rising up to 2 meters after record rainfall. Thailand's military has deployed aircraft and boats to deliver medicine, food, and water as emergency teams report being overwhelmed by calls for help. In Peru, a court sentenced former President Martin Vizcarra to 14 years in prison for taking bribes worth more than $600,000 during his time as governor of Moquegua. The court also issued a 9-year ban on holding public office on Wednesday. Vizcarra says he will appeal, calling the ruling, quote, revenge, but officials say he is expected to begin serving his sentence immediately. He joins several other former Peruvian presidents already jailed in corruption cases, highlighting the country's ongoing political instability. In the U.S., a loggerhead sea turtle that drew more than 100 million views online during life-saving treatment in the Florida Keys was released back into the ocean on Wednesday. The turtle named Molly had been rescued from a crab trap line and had a massive tumor weighing approximately 4.6 kilos removed during a 3-hour surgery. According to the Key West Turtle Hospital, Molly is the first loggerhead of her size to survive such a removal. Staff says her recovery marks a major breakthrough in treating the virus-driven disease. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
Rain and snow have been falling in most parts of the country today. While about 5 to 20 millimeters of rain is expected, heavy snow of up to 10 centimeters will also pile up in the mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province. Therefore, heavy snow advisories have been issued in some parts of Gangwon-do province. After the rain and snow stop tonight, freezing temperatures will cover the whole country tomorrow morning. The temperature in Seoul will plummet sharply below 0 to -1 degree Celsius, and it will be cold throughout inland areas. With strong wind warnings in place, coastal areas and mountainous areas will be even colder with gusty winds. Tomorrow morning will be cold nationwide with Chuncheon at -4, Daejeon at 0 degrees. During the day, temperatures will rise to around 10 degrees in most parts of the country. For the time being, temperatures will go up and down, so please take good care of your health. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up now is our daily panel session on the country's latest space mission.